The year is 2023. The room is quiet, not a reverent quiet. The quiet of a place where money is speaking, and everyone else is listening. An auction house in rural Nebraska. Fluorescent lights hum over pressed tin ceilings. The air smells of stale coffee and clean paper. On a large screen, a digital map shows a square of land. Parcel 7B. A perfect section. 640 acres of prime bottomland. The auctioneer, a young man in a crisp shirt, clears his throat. His voice is calm. Final. Sold. For $3.2 million. He pauses, looks at his screen. Sold to Miller Farms Incorporated. A low murmur moves through the room. Miller Farms, of course. In the back row, an old man sits very still. His name is Frank Thompson. He is 88 years old. He wears a tweed jacket, even indoors. His hands, spotted with age, rest on a polished cane. He heard the name, Miller Farms. He looks at the map on the screen. Parcel 7B. He knows that land. He sees it every morning from his kitchen window. It is the land directly adjacent to the 5 acres he retired on. His view, his peace, his quiet end of the world. Now it belongs to Miller Farms. Frank felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was the cold, smooth feeling of a circle closing. A story he had started 50 years ago was now, finally, ending. And he was not the one writing the last page. 50 years ago, Frank Thompson sat behind a different desk, a much larger desk, made of solid oak, in his office at the First County Bank. He was the man who said yes or no. And 50 years ago, the founder of Miller Farms had sat across from him, a girl of 20. He had told her she couldn't possibly manage one section of land, let alone 20. He told her no. This is the kind of story we tell here, the ones that take 50 years to unfold. The ones about the people who were told no, the people who didn't argue, who didn't shout, who simply went to work. If you believe in the long game, subscribe to this channel, because the story of Sarah Miller is a story you need to hear. What happened next changed everything. Let's go back to the beginning. The year is 1973, March. The Nebraska winter is losing its grip. The ground is a sea of mud. The sky is the color of lead. In a small farmhouse, the air is thick with grief. John Miller was gone. A heart attack at 45. Quick, unforgiving. He left behind a wife in shock, a daughter of 20, and 80 acres of land. 80 acres and a mountain of debt. The farm wasn't a living. It was a slow death. His daughter's name was Sarah Miller. She was 20 years old. She had her father's quiet hands and her mother's stubborn chin. She did not cry at the funeral. She stood by the grave, watched them lower the casket, felt the cold wind on her face, and she made a decision. She would not sell. She would not leave. This was her home. The dirt under her nails was her inheritance. Her father had left one other thing, a ledger, bound in cracked brown leather. Inside, 20 years of his life, written in a neat, careful hand. Every seed purchase, every bushel harvested, every gallon of fuel, every repair, every profit, every loss. The numbers told a brutal story, a story of working harder and harder, for less and less. 80 acres was not enough. It was a trap, too small to be efficient, too big to walk away from. Sarah spent nights at the kitchen table, the ledger open under the single bare bulb. She read it like a Bible. She learned the rhythms of the land, the language of the seasons, the cold arithmetic of survival. She knew the farm was failing, but in her father's numbers, she saw not just a history of struggle, she saw a map, a path he was trying to find, a way out. Then opportunity came. It arrived in a notice from the county. The section of land next to theirs was for sale. The old Henderson place, 640 acres. It had been fallow for 5 years. The fences were down. The soil was tired. The weeds were winning. It was a mess, which meant it was cheap. For Sarah, it was more than cheap. It was a chance, the only chance. With that land, their farm could be viable. They could achieve scale. They could survive. She did the math, over and over, in the back of her father's ledger, her pencil moving with a desperate certainty. She calculated yields, input costs, loan payments. It was tight, dangerously tight. But it was possible. She just needed the money. She needed a loan. She needed the bank. She needed Frank Thompson. She put on her best dress, a simple blue one her mother had made. She brushed her hair until it shone. She put her father's ledger in a worn satchel, and she drove the old Ford pickup into town. The First County Bank was a fortress of brick and marble. It was built to look permanent, to look certain. Frank Thompson's office was on the second floor. The door was solid oak. His name was in gold letters. President. Sarah took a deep breath, and she knocked. Frank Thompson was a good man. Everyone in town said so. He was a deacon at his church. He coached Little League. He served on the hospital board. His handshake was firm. His smile was kind. His office was warm. Pictures of his wife and 2 smiling sons stood on the credenza. A plaque for Community Man of the Year hung on the wall. He remembered Sarah from when she was a little girl. He had known her father. "I was so sorry to hear about John," he said. "He was a good man, a hard worker." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," Sarah said. Her voice was steady. She sat in the leather chair across from his massive desk. She felt small, but she would not act small. She opened her satchel. She placed the ledger on his desk. The worn leather looked out of place on the polished wood. "I'm here about the Henderson place," she said. "I want to buy it." Frank's smile tightened just a little at the edges. He leaned back in his chair. He steepled his fingers. "The Henderson place," he repeated. "That's a lot of land, Sarah." "I know," she said. "I've done the math." She opened the ledger. She showed him her calculations, her projections, her neat columns of numbers. She spoke for 10 minutes, clearly, confidently. She laid out her plan for crop rotation, for restoring the soil, for managing the debt. She had thought of everything. When she was finished, the office was silent. Frank Thompson looked at her. Then he looked at the ledger. He sighed, a soft, paternal sound. "Sarah," he began. His voice was gentle. It was the voice of a man who was about to deliver a difficult truth. The voice of a man who was certain he was right. "I knew your father for 25 years. He was one of the best farmers in this county. But even he couldn't make 80 acres work. He tried. Lord knows he tried." "This is different," Sarah said. "This is about scale." Frank shook his head slowly. "No, this is about risk. This is a huge risk. That land hasn't been worked in years. It'll take a fortune just to get it plantable. The equipment you have, it's not big enough. The hours. Sarah, do you understand the work involved? It's a job for 3 men, not 1. His voice trailed off. He didn't say the word. "Girl." but it hung in the air between them, thick and heavy. "I understand the work," she said. He leaned forward. His face was a mask of sincere concern. "I'm not going to be the man who loans John Miller's daughter the money to lose his farm. I can't do it. I won't. The bank's board would never approve it. It's too much for you. A girl your age all alone out there. It's not right." He believed it. Every word. That was the devastating part. This was not cruelty. It was kindness. A terrible, suffocating kindness. He thought he was protecting her. He closed the ledger. He pushed it gently back across the desk. "Now," he said, his voice brightening, "here's what I can do. I can approve a small personal loan. Enough to help you and your mother get settled in town. You can sell the farm, pay off the debts. You're a smart girl. You could get a good secretarial job, start fresh. It's for your own good, Sarah. It's the sensible thing to do." Sarah looked at him. She saw the certainty in his eyes, the absolute conviction that he knew what was best for her. She felt a cold, quiet anger rise inside her. Not the hot anger of a fight, something different. The quiet indignation of being erased, of being dismissed. She stood up. She took the ledger from his desk. She did not argue. She did not plead. She simply looked him in the eye, and she delivered the quiet devastation. "So you've already decided for me." She turned and walked out of his office, leaving him in the certain, comfortable silence of his own good intentions. She drove home. The world outside the truck window was a blur of gray and brown. She did not cry. The anger had burned the tears away. She walked into the farmhouse. Her mother was lying down. Her grandmother, Eleanor, was at the kitchen table, mending a pair of work gloves. Her hands were gnarled with arthritis, but they were steady. Eleanor looked up as Sarah came in. She did not ask. She waited. Sarah sat down at the table. She placed the ledger between them. "He said no," Sarah said. Her voice was flat, empty. "He said I should sell the farm, move to town, be a secretary." Eleanor stopped sewing. She looked at her granddaughter's face. She saw the flicker of defeat in her eyes. She reached out. Her worn, wrinkled hand came to rest on the leather-bound ledger, on top of a generation of work, a generation of struggle. She said 5 words that would become Sarah's creed. "The land doesn't care." Sarah looked up. Her grandmother's eyes were clear and hard as winter stone. "The land doesn't care who you are," she repeated. "It only cares what you do." A silence settled over the kitchen. The quiet decision was made. They would not sell. They would not run. They would find another way. Because the dirt is enough. The next morning, Sarah started selling things. She sold half the small herd of cattle her father had kept. She got a fair price, cash. She sold her mother's good china, the silver candlesticks from her wedding. Her mother didn't protest. She saw the new light in her daughter's eyes, a hard, determined light. Cash. Sarah gathered every dollar they had. It wasn't much, $5,300. Not enough for a down payment at a bank, but maybe enough for a different kind of deal. She didn't go to the real estate agent. She went directly to Mr. Henderson. He was in a nursing home in the next county. His mind was still sharp. His eyes were tired. Sarah sat by his bed. She made her offer. "I don't have much," she said, "but I have this." She told him the amount, $5,300, for a down payment, and then she proposed a contract for deed. She would pay him directly, every month. For 10 years, with 7% interest, higher than the bank rate. But there was a catch. If she missed a single payment, just one, the contract was void. The land and all her payments would revert to him. It was a gamble, a huge gamble. Mr. Henderson looked at her for a long time. He saw the exhaustion in her face, but he also saw the grit. He saw her father in her. He remembered John Miller, a man who always paid his debts. He nodded slowly. "All right, girl," he said. "You've got a deal." He saw the fire in her eyes. He decided to bet on the fire. Word got around town, as it always does. Sarah Miller was trying to farm the old Henderson place on a contract for deed. The community split. At the coffee shop, the old farmers shook their heads. "That girl's going to lose her father's place," one said. "Frank Thompson was right to turn her down. She's in way over her head. It's a damn shame." The talk was a constant low hum of doubt. It followed her to the feed store, to the post office. It was a heavy cloak of disapproval. They weren't being cruel. They were being certain. They thought they knew how the story ended. But a few people watched with a different kind of interest. One of them was Old Man Hemlock. He farmed the quarter section west of the Millers. He was an eccentric. He still used old equipment. He talked to his crops. Most people thought he was a little crazy. One afternoon, he drove his ancient, rust-pocked tractor into her yard. It was an Alice Chalmers Model G from the 1950s. It looked like a museum piece. He shut it off. The engine coughed to a stop. He climbed down. "I saw you at the bank that day," he said. His voice was raspy. "I saw Thompson turn you down." Sarah just nodded. Hemlock spit a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "He's a fool," he said, "but he thinks he's a good man. That's the worst kind of fool." He gestured to his tractor. "It ain't pretty, but it runs. Engine's in the back. You can see your rows. Perfect for cultivating. You can use it." Sarah stared at him. "I can't pay you," she said. "I know," he grunted. "Pay me a share of the crop, if there is a crop." And that was that. He spent the next week teaching her, not just how to drive the old tractor, but how to fix it, how to listen to the engine, how to feel the mechanics of it. He taught her how to weld, how to grind valves, how to make a broken thing whole again. She was a fast learner. Her hands, it turned out, were good for more than just baking bread. They were good for machinery. She spent that first spring working from before dawn until after dusk. The work was brutal. She cleared brush by hand. She pulled hundreds of old fence posts from the ground. She walked every one of the 640 acres, feeling the soil, reading the landscape. She used her father's ledger as her guide. She couldn't afford expensive fertilizer, so she planted legumes to fix nitrogen in the soil, clover and alfalfa, just like her grandfather had. She couldn't afford hybrid seed, so she planted open-pollinated corn, saving the best ears for next year's seed. She wasn't just farming. She was rediscovering a lost art, the art of self-sufficiency, the art of making do. She was inventing. She was surviving. The land was responding, slowly, grudgingly. The green shoots of clover began to cover the tired soil. A promise, a beginning. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something by someone who thought they were protecting you? Someone who genuinely believed they were being kind. Someone who smiled while they closed the door in your face. Let us know in the comments. Because that certainty, that kind refusal, is the hardest wall to climb. It cannot be fought with anger. It can only be disproven. And Sarah Miller was just getting started. Let me tell you about the next 50 years. The work was a rhythm. Sunrise, sunset, planting, harvesting. The years began to stack up. like cordwood for a long winter. 1978. She paid off the contract for deed, 2 years early. She drove to the nursing home, handed Mr. Henderson the final check, cash. He shook her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were proud. "I knew you had it in you, girl," he whispered. The news made it back to town. Frank Thompson heard about it at the diner. He was having lunch with the mayor. He just shook his head, a small, knowing smile on his face. "She got lucky," he said. "A couple of good years of rain. It won't last." But it did last. 1982. Sarah bought the 80 acres to the north. The land was played out. The farmer who owned it had used too much chemical fertilizer. The soil was dead. Sarah bought it for a song, cash. She didn't plant corn or soybeans. She planted buckwheat, a cover crop, to choke out the weeds and add organic matter to the soil. The other farmers laughed. "She's planting weeds to get rid of weeds," they said. The next year, she disked it under and planted winter wheat. Her yields were 15% higher than the county average. The laughing stopped. 1985. The farm crisis hit. Commodity prices collapsed. Interest rates soared. Farmers who were leveraged to the hilt began to go under. They had loans from Frank Thompson's bank, loans for big new tractors, for massive combines, for land bought at inflated prices. Frank Thompson had to foreclose on men he'd known his whole life. It was business, he said. It was painful, but it was necessary. Sarah had no debt, not a penny. Her equipment was old, but it was paid for. Her land was hers, free and clear. A neighbor to the east went bankrupt, a good man, a good family. The bank was auctioning off his farm, a quarter section, 160 acres. Sarah went to the auction, but she didn't bid. She went to the farmer the night before. She sat at his kitchen table, and she made him an offer. A fair price, more than the bank would get at auction. Cash. He cried when he signed the papers, but he knew the land was going to someone who would care for it, someone who understood. The mantra played in her head, a quiet, constant hum. The land doesn't care who you are, it only cares what you do. Frank Thompson saw it all. He couldn't help but see it. He drove past her expanding farm on his way to the Rotary Club, on his way to church. He saw the new fences, straight and tight. He saw the fields, clean and healthy. He saw the new grain bins she built in 1988, paid for with money earned from the dirt, cash. He saw the neat, sensible farmhouse she built in 1990, after the old one finally gave out, cash. He never waved. She never waved back. There was nothing to say. The proof was in the land, green and growing, an undeniable fact, a quiet rebellion spreading across the landscape. 1995, she incorporated, Miller Farms Incorporated. It sounded official, powerful, but the headquarters was still the same kitchen table. The CEO still wore work boots. And the most important document was still a cracked leather ledger. 2005. She was one of the largest independent operators in the state. She owned over 10,000 acres, all of it contiguous. A vast, beautiful patchwork of fields she had healed and nurtured. She was respected, admired, a little feared. She didn't borrow money. She didn't have to. She had become the bank. From 80 acres to 720. From 720 to over 10,000. All of it bought with money earned from the dirt. All of it bought with one thing, cash. And all of it started with a man in a comfortable office. A good man, a kind man. A man who was certain. A man who said no. Now we return to the auction. The year is 2023. The fluorescent lights, the smell of stale coffee. Frank Thompson is 88 years old. His world has become small. His bank had been sold in the late 90s, swallowed by a national conglomerate. He was given a generous retirement package and a gold watch. He and his wife built a beautiful home on 5 acres of land, overlooking the valley. His sons were grown. They lived in cities. They were lawyers and accountants. They had no interest in the land. Frank's life was quiet. He read the paper. He watched the birds. He tended his garden, and he looked at his view. The view was everything. The rolling hills, the patchwork of fields, the peaceful, unchanging landscape. Then the for sale sign went up. On parcel 7B, the 640-acre section right in front of his house, his view. Frank was worried. He heard rumors. A developer from Omaha was interested. They wanted to build a subdivision, rows of identical houses, a golf course. His peace would be shattered. So he came to the auction, just to watch, to see who would be his new neighbor. He watched the bidding climb. 2 million, 2.5, 3. It was more than any developer would pay for farmland. Someone was buying it to farm it. Frank felt a wave of relief. Then the auctioneer's voice cut through the room. Sold for $3.2 million to Miller Farms Incorporated. The circle was closing. A few days later, a pickup truck pulled into his driveway. A clean but unremarkable Ford F-150. The driver's side door opened, and Sarah Miller got out. She was 70 years old. Her hair was gray, pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her face was a road map of sun and wind. Her eyes were the same, clear and steady. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt. She looked like she had just come from fixing a fence. Frank met her on the porch. He leaned on his cane. He felt old and small. "Ms. Miller," he said. "Sarah." His voice was thin. She just nodded. "Congratulations on the purchase," he said. "It's a fine piece of land." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," she said. Her voice had not changed. It was calm, factual. An awkward silence fell between them, the weight of 50 unspoken years. Frank cleared his throat. He was a man who was used to being in charge. But he was not in charge here. He was a supplicant. "I was hoping," he began. "I know it's not my place to ask, but I hope you aren't planning on putting in a hog confinement, or something that would spoil the—" He gestured vaguely at the valley, at his view. "Well, the landscape," he finished lamely. Sarah looked at him, a long, unblinking gaze. She looked past him, at his beautiful house, his manicured lawn, his perfect, peaceful retirement. The camera of our story would be on her face, weathered, calm, powerful. She held his future in her hands, the future of his peace, the future of his quiet end of the world, and she knew it. He had once held her future in his hands, and he had closed it into a fist. She let the silence stretch, let him feel the full weight of it. Then she spoke. Her voice was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was quiet, and it was devastating. "Mr. Thompson, 50 years ago, you sat behind your desk, and you decided what my future should be. You told me what I was capable of. You drew the map for my life, a small life, in a small town. Today, I get to decide what your view will be." She paused. I'll think about it. She got back in her truck. She did not look back. She drove away, leaving him alone on his porch, with nothing but his view, and the crushing weight of a debt he could never repay. So what happened next? What did she do with the land? She didn't build a hog farm. She didn't put up a feedlot. She didn't sell it to a developer. She did something else, something that no one expected. She put the entire section into a conservation trust. She worked with the state university. She planted the 640 acres with native grasses, big bluestem, switchgrass, Indian grass, the grasses the pioneers had seen. She restored a wetland in the low-lying areas. It became a wildlife sanctuary, a haven for pheasants and deer, for migrating birds. Frank Thompson got to keep his view. In fact, it was more beautiful than ever. Every morning he would look out his window, and he would see not a monument to her success, but a monument to her grace. It was a gift and a judgment, both at the same time. A quiet, constant reminder of the woman he had underestimated, the future he had failed to see. Because the legacy was never about the money or the land. It was about something bigger. In 2010, she established the Miller Agricultural Scholarship for young women. It was for girls who wanted to farm. The first requirement on the application was simple. You had to have been denied traditional financing from a bank. You had to have a letter of refusal. You had to have been told no. The first recipient was a young woman from the Sandhills. Her name was Maria. She used the money to buy a small herd of grass-fed cattle. Today, she runs a successful direct-to-consumer beef operation. She has 3 daughters. They all know the name Sarah Miller. The legacy is in the soil. Sarah's granddaughter, Chloe, got a degree in soil science. She came back to the farm. She is now the head of operations for Miller Farms. She is implementing regenerative agriculture techniques, no-till farming, complex cover crop cocktails, rotational grazing. The land is healthier than it has ever been. The carbon content in the soil is increasing every year. The farm is not just sustainable, it is healing the earth. And on the old kitchen table, in the new farmhouse, sits a cracked leather ledger. Sometimes, Chloe will open it. She'll run her finger over her grandfather's neat, careful handwriting. Then she'll turn the page and see her grandmother's notes in the margins. Fierce, determined pencil strokes, ideas, calculations, dreams. A history of quiet rebellion, a testament to the long game. The most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. Certainty about another person's capabilities, delivered with kindness. It is more damaging than outright hostility, because it cannot be fought with anger. It can only be disproven, with decades of work, with a quiet, unshakable belief in yourself. The land doesn't care who you are. It only cares what you do. Right now, somewhere in the world, a young woman is sitting across a desk from a man who is about to tell her what she is capable of. He will sound reasonable. He will sound kind. He will believe he is helping. This story is for her. If you know someone who needs to hear that the long game is the only game that matters, share this story with them. Subscribe for more stories of quiet rebellion. And tell us in the comments about the person who believed in you when no one else would. The person who looked at you and didn't see a risk, but an opportunity. The person who helped you prove the doubters wrong. One day at a time, for 50 years.